Malala, a girl from Pakistan raised from the ashes of great unrest, violence, and oppressive control, fought for girls' rights. She stood when others would have crumbled and spoke out. Even when her life was in grave danger, she pushed on. She now stands as a champion and a beacon of hope for girls and women all over the world. Malala, a Girl's Champion, a film by Lucas Peralta, Torrin Kelly, Christopher Worley, and Pablo Gallegos. The Taliban are a byproduct of the Soviet-Afghan War, in which the USSR invaded Afghanistan in 1979. Rural areas of Afghanistan would rebel against Soviets by fighting a guerrilla war. These Sunni fundamentalist groups would survive, and officially, in 1994, one group would start calling themselves the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, or the Taliban. The Taliban would grow in numbers and support until they started committing terrorist acts outside of the Middle East, such as the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the U.S.
We headed directly into the World Trade Center. It just flew into it, into the other tower coming from south to north. I watched the plane fly into the World Trade Center. It was a jet. It was a very large plane. It was going fast. It went past the Ritz-Carlton Hotel that's being built in Battery Park. It flew right past.
After the 9/11 terrorist attacks, former President George W. Bush waged a war on terrorism in the Middle East, primarily focusing Al-Qaeda and ergo the Taliban.
More than 2 weeks ago, I gave Taliban leaders a series of clear and specific demands. Close terrorist training camps, hand over leaders of the Al-Qaeda network, and return all foreign nationals, including American citizens unjustly detained in your country. None of these demands were met. And now, the Taliban will pay a price.
After several weeks of relentless bombings and drone strikes by the U.S. and allies, many Taliban forces dispersed and would later degenerate across the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. These forces, now with a strong footing in Pakistan, would form the Tehrik-i-Taliban, a new movement recognized by the Afghani Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Led by Baitullah Mehsud, in 2007, the Tehrik-i-Taliban invaded and destroyed the once peaceful town of Mingora in Swat Valley. They imposed laws that would mean the destruction of the education system, the infrastructure, and the economy of Swat. People who fought the Tehrik-i-Taliban would often lose their lives. The Tehrik-i-Taliban would also instill fear in the people of Swat by bombing buildings, issuing public beatings, executions, and other acts of heinous behavior. One of the last people to dare speak out was Zawdin Yousafzai, an advocate for public education and a principal of his own girls' school in Swat, who constantly fought against the suppression of education, and now for his hometown of Mingora. Eventually, his hard work would pay off in an unexpected way. A correspondent for the BBC approached Zawdin, asking if a schoolgirl could speak out about their experience under Tehrik-i-Taliban oppression. Zawdin asked his 11-year-old daughter Malala if she could write a blog. She agreed and started one named Gul Makai. The Yousafzai family and the town of Mingora would gain recognition and eventually be noticed by a reporter working for the New York Times. Adam Ellick, working for the Times, took a camera crew to Mingora and filmed a dramatic documentary profiling Malala titled Class Dismissed: The Death of Female Education.
In the area where I live, there are some people who want to stop educating girls through guns.
The 33-minute documentary would become successful and gain international attention. For this interview, we spoke to Dr. Bani Hashemi from the University of New Mexico.
Women are finding their own ground, and they are becoming increasingly conscious of their rights. And one of these fundamental rights is education. These barriers and obstacles are increasingly crumbling.
Tensions between the Pakistani government and the Tehrik-i-Taliban were rising. People like Zawdin and Malala were drawing international attention by fighting for the rights of girls, further intensifying the situation. Shown in the documentary, during the summer of 2009, after receiving much pressure from people like Zawdin, the Pakistani government led a campaign to regain control of Swat Valley. The Pakistani military led a brutal attack to try and force the Tehrik-i-Taliban militancy out of Swat. During this time, the people of Swat were forced to move.
And there was no discipline, no administration, nothing was there. Everybody was fleeing away.
The Yousafzai family fled, Malala, her two younger brothers, and her mother bounced around Pakistan, staying with family. At the same time, Zawdin and three friends stayed together and continued their protests against the Tehrik-i-Taliban and the ongoing fight in Swat. The Yousafzai family was originally promised that they'd be able to return to Mingoro in 1 week. A week turned into two, two into a month, and a month into 3. Malala grew in strength. She continued to advocate for girls' rights, and despite the adversities and dangers that she faced, she pushed on. In 2011, the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Yousaf Raza Gilani, awarded Malala the country's first Youth Peace Prize. While this was a triumphant time for Malala, others wanted to put an end to her campaign. On October 9, 2012, at the age of 15, Malala Yousafzai and 3 classmates were shot by a masked gunman working for the Tehrik-i-Taliban. Malala, after being shot on the left side of her face, was in critical condition and rushed to a military hospital, where a surgeon worked 5 hours to relieve pressure from her brain. Doctors realized that she had become septic. Her blood wasn't clotting, her kidneys and lungs were shutting down. Thankfully, a royal airliner from the United Arab Emirates was given for Malala's only chance. The plane was converted to a trauma center, and Malala took a daring 8-hour flight to Birmingham, England. Once there, she spent many more days in a coma, and finally she awoke. The doctors were unsure whether Malala would ever be able to walk or speak again. After 3 months of physical and other therapy and several more surgeries to reattach nerves severed by the gun wound, she lived. While left physically scarred and most of the left half of her face being paralyzed, Malala prevailed. Only a few months after that, she stood in front of a UN assembly and gave a message. She called for peace and education rights.
When we were in Swat, the north of Pakistan, we realized the importance of pens and books when we saw the guns. The wise saying, "The pen is mightier than sword," was true.
That same year, Malala founded the Malala Fund, a way for patrons to donate money directly to helping aid children in Pakistan. While Malala's goal was intended for Pakistani rights, and that's where her campaign had begun, it quickly shifted to a global mission. Now her work helps in Afghanistan, Brazil, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, and the Syria region. Her cause has helped millions of girls, teachers, and schools in places where education is traditionally stopped. Malala was awarded the 2014 Nobel Peace Prize, the youngest person to ever win the award.
As far as I know, I'm just a committed and even stubborn person who wants to see every child getting quality education, who wants to see women having equal rights, and who wants peace in every corner of the world.
This was time for pride and gratification in her complex story. Since then, she's won over 24 awards, including the 2013 International Children's Peace Prize and an honorary Canadian citizenship. In 2017, Malala announced on Twitter that she was accepted into the University of Oxford and now studies philosophy, politics, and economics, a path likely to propel her into a political scene. It's unclear where Malala will go from now, but she's undoubtedly changed the world and will continue to do so. Thank you for your attention.